right, I want to bring in Colonel Cedric Leighton now, also joining us from D.C. Colonel Leighton is, of course, a U.S. Air Force retired. What we often don't introduce him as on this show is a former National Security Agency Deputy Director. So he has a unique and important perspective here. Great to see you, Colonel. Thanks for being with us.
It's my pleasure, Jonathan. It's great to see you as well.
So, first of all, your straightforward reaction to the Russian decision to grant 1 year's temporary asylum to Edward Snowden.
Well, I think it shows that President Putin most certainly cannot be trusted in his dealings with the United States and dealings on intelligence matters with the United States. And that's not a great surprise, as Tom Dupree mentioned earlier. But the big issue here is that, on the one hand, Putin said that he would allow for Snowden to stay in Russia if he didn't say anything more. On the other side, he clearly did say something more, maybe privately, to the Russians. But I think the Russians got a lot of information out of Snowden, and for that reason, he's allowed to stay in that country.
From your unique perspective as somebody who served at the NSA, how much damage has this done? And in fact, do you believe it's damaging in the first place?
It is damaging to an extent. Now, on the one hand, it's clear that in a democracy you need to have a degree of transparency when it comes to intelligence collection matters, more so than you would in other forms of government and other societies. But having said that, the damage in this particular case has been significant because what it does is it may very well force the NSA to move into different methods of collection, and they cost a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to change that around, potentially certainly in the high millions, if not billions of dollars. On the other hand, there is also the problem of being able to access the sources and methods and prevent the types of actions that we saw on 9/11, with the Tsarnaev brothers, and other forms of terrorist actions that, could have been prevented, could possibly be prevented through programs of this type. None of these programs are foolproof. None of these programs are perfect, but they are a line of defense in the war against terror. And so when the sources and methods are revealed on the operational side, there is clearly an issue here from an intelligence perspective and an intelligence gathering perspective.
Colonel, the liberty versus security debate is a very difficult one, a very important one. Leaving aside your views on whether Edward Snowden was right to do what he did in the way that he did it, do you think that what we now know about the NSA shows that the NSA overstepped the mark?
No, I don't think so. When you look at the statements that have been made by NSA officials as well as Department of Justice officials in the congressional hearings and in public statements, you take one aspect of that, and then you also look at the congressional statements that have been submitted for the record, including the written statements that over the course of several years have been released to Congress, and Congress has had an opportunity to look at this program. I would say that NSA has not overstepped the mark in this case. Now, if there is a political decision to limit this, that is one thing, but NSA has operated fully within the bounds of the law as it exists at this time, and as it existed basically since 2007. There is no way that one could accuse the NSA of overstepping its legal authorities, because what they've done is they have attempted to meet all of the compliance requirements that are in these rules and all the requirements that have been set aside by the House and the Senate when it comes to the oversight of these particular surveillance programs. So in that sense, the NSA has not overstepped its bounds, but society can make a collective decision, or we can make a political decision that says that this should be done in another way. And I think NSA and the administration are open to that possibility, because I think they don't want this to taint further intelligence operations.
Colonel, while I have you here, we always appreciate your perspective on all matters of foreign affairs. We're going to talk to an international advocacy officer with the Cairo Institute for Human Rights Studies in a moment about the increasingly tense situation in Egypt. What is your view of the actions of the Egyptian military in their crackdown on supporters of the former president, Mohamed Morsi, whom the Egyptian military deposed in a coup, whether the White House wants to call it a coup or not, and the military now cracking down on, it appears, all Muslim Brotherhood supporters.
Yes, I think that that is a huge issue because on the one hand, the Muslim Brotherhood was elected to political power in Egypt, and whether we like it or not, that is the way the election turned out. The military actions in Egypt give me a lot of pause because on the one hand, you are not particularly, as an American policy person, you're not particularly comfortable with what the Muslim Brotherhood is standing for, but on the other hand, you want to respect the rule of democracy. So when you start seeing the army cracking down, statements by a sunglass-wearing military leader in front of the press urging supporters of the military to come forward, that becomes a significant issue and does not speak well for the evolution of democracy in Egypt, and it gives me a lot of concern. I do want to see Egypt become a stable country once again. I do want Egypt to continue to have a relationship with Israel, and I do want to make sure that Egypt maintains a good relationship with the United States, but we have to be very careful that we don't turn in one person that we don't like for another person that becomes impossible to deal with on moral grounds, and that becomes a significant issue.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Colonel Cedric Leighton, U.S. Air Force retired, former NSA Deputy Director, and of course currently President of Cedric Leighton Associates. Great to talk to you as always, Colonel. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Jonathan. Thanks so much for having me.